Right. Yeah.
Okay, so we are now live on YouTube.
I see Gauri Shankar there.
Hello, yeah, good morning. Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi, Shankar. How are you?
Hello, Partho. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
So good to see Rajiva online.
Yes. Thank
So you are
you.
back in action fully?
95%, I would say.
That's all right. That's all right. You know, I except in mathematics, we were not expected to get 100. All other subjects, we were allowed to get less than 100.
95% confidence is.
Yeah, I mean, 95% life is fantastic.
Yeah.
Hey, Rajiv. Good morning. Good to see you.
Yeah, good part. Good. Last 3 months have been hell, but now, fortunately, I am now on a.
Upward. Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah.
So, Professor Satyamurthy, you were talking about old days and movie halls and this no smoking.
Yeah.
Today, they don't allow you to smoke inside, but one thing which they did not allow then was no food was allowed inside the movie halls. And now,
okay.
now not only it is allowed, they may encourage it and they come and serve it inside. So
no, provided you buy it from them.
Of course.
You cannot bring food from your house.
No.
Whereas
they don't even allow you to bring in water.
I know. So somebody has to file a PAL on that, and
that's really ridiculous. Not allowing water and insisting that water should be bought there. Right. But anyway, that's the.
But my grandmother didn't obey such rule. She would bring her murukku and so on. Anyway, I will not make our president tense. I will stop here.
Hey, I'm enjoying. Go ahead. What is the building that we see with the reflection and so on? So on the, well, you see two buildings. Oh, the one with reflection is the Indian Statistical Institute, where Rajiv and I graduated from.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
And we all remembered this reflection on a specific day of the year.
Okay.
So
and
there's a pond. Sorry?
What is the date?
That's the foundation day of the Institute. Okay. And yeah, Malnumis's birthday, essentially. And there's a pond. And by the way, this pond is very historic because JBS Haldane would swim in this pond upside down with a cigar on his mouth. And you must have read that story multiple times in my essays and elsewhere.
Okay, I have not read this before.
It's in Ronald Clark's book, and I've also written about it in some of my essays. Yeah, so that's that building, and the other building is the National Institute of Biomedical Genomics.
Okay, that also I have not seen.
Yeah, you have not visited.
I came close to
very
that.
Very close, yes, and I got to know that.
I said Kolkata. Yeah, see, there is IACS also has its building and its reflection in its pool in front of it. But from the picture, I knew it is not IACS. Okay, good. So I get to see ISI for the first time. I get to see NIBMG for the first time.
Yes, you see a histogram and a double helix.
Okay, I see. That's what it means. All right.
ISI is a histogram.
Okay.
And well, sideways.
Yeah.
And NIBMG is a double helix.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I didn't pay attention to the double helix part, nor did I pay attention to the histogram part. Yeah, but it is good to know. Yeah. But Nada, you will be happy to see. I don't know whether you will stay for a couple of minutes or not. I will be showing a picture of J.C. Bose. I know sometimes you are the trustee of the Bose Institute, right? Yeah.
So I will be there. What I will do is log off for 30 seconds, and I'm right now on my laptop, and I'll go on to my mobile phone.
Whatever is convenient.
Yeah. I do wish to listen to your lecture.
We are about to start.
Good morning, madam.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, dear students. Good day on this August morning. I'm Indulekha, one of the associate editors of Resonance and one of the conveners of this meeting. I'm a professor teaching physics and astrophysics at the Mahatma Gandhi University, Kerala, and I'm joining in from Kerala. Resonance, Journal of Science Education, is co-published by the Indian Academy of Sciences with Springer Nature. Resonance is celebrating 25 years of its publication, and in celebration, the Academy has arranged the Resonance Lecture Series. In collaboration with the Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, Thiruvananthapuram, and the Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, Mohali. We are living through difficult times. Time always moves forward. Time is life. Life moves forward. Life has to move forward. Life has to be lived forward. Time has moved forward. It's almost the time for starting the sessions now. Over to Professor Suri, the Chief Editor of Resonance, joining in from the Indian Statistical Institute, Bengaluru. Thank you.
Thank you, Indulekha. Good morning to everybody. On behalf of Resonance, it's a pleasure to extend a warm welcome to everyone to this special lecture series event. Before I formally introduce and welcome the distinguished scientists who are here to inaugurate the program, I'll very briefly say something about Resonance, the journal. As you know, Resonance has completed 25 years of publication. Apart from disseminating topics in science and mathematics to undergraduate students and teachers in a stimulating manner, the focus is to cultivate a scientific temper. As it is said, the scientific method carries a validity and universality which transcends any other principle devised by man. Resonance is a rather unique journal, carrying as it does articles on very diverse science subjects in each issue. It endeavors to bring a spectrum of aspects right from historical anecdotes to novelty of thinking to state-of-the-art research right down to the classroom. We have had a number of instances of people from different parts of the world writing to us, tell us that they have found some of our articles very useful in their teaching. Each issue features the contributions and the achievements of a celebrated scientist. To celebrate the completion of 25 years of publication. To celebrate completion of 25 years of publication, Resonance has organized this 5-day lecture series, which, considering the situation, has to be held online. Here, I must say that even though Resonance is primarily aimed at undergraduate students, there is a sizable number of articles that target younger students at the high school level as well. So we have this program which has 2 parts. The first 2 days aimed at students in high school who are interested in science, and the last 3 days targeting undergraduate students. Resonance is glad to have the ICERs in Thiruvananthapuram and Mohali as collaborators in this happy endeavor. On behalf of Resonance, I'm glad to acknowledge this assistance and welcome everyone, especially the students, to this event. I believe we have put together talks on diverse interesting topics by various experts and hope that students find them enjoyable, illuminating, and inspiring. Now I would like to welcome Professor Partha Majumdar, the President of the Indian Academy of Sciences, and Professor Gauri Shankar, the Director of ICER Mohali, to inaugurate this first 2-day program consisting of talks for high school students. So about Professor Majumdar is a distinguished professor and founding director of the National Institute of Biomedical Genomics. You can see the photograph of the building at the back. Professor Majumdar has been decorated with several honors and awards. These are too numerous to list, and I mentioned just a few. Acharya Prafulla Chandra Roy Memorial Award, J.C. Bose National Fellowship, Member of Council Human Genome Organization, Hugo, elected member International Statistical Institute, The Hague, Netherlands, elected member Third World Academy of Sciences, Trieste, and elected fellow West Bengal Academy of Science and Technology, Birla Award for Scientific Research, Tanbaxi Research Award for Medical Sciences, and many others. He is also an elected fellow of all the 3 academies in the country. I must add that he is known to be a great orator and has been honored with several awards in this capacity also. I welcome Professor Majumdar and request him to say a few words. Professor Majumdar. I think you are muted.
Yeah, so as I was saying that I'm really glad to be here, but in some ways I'm sad that I can't get to see the students. I can't see them shake their heads either in agreement or in disagreement, and that's very painful. But at this time, we don't have a choice because the coronavirus is not leaving us. So we have to do this online. Let me say a few words about our academy, the Indian Academy of Sciences. As a matter of fact, many of you may know that there are 3 academies of science in India. Indian Academy of Sciences was established by Sir C.V. Raman, our Science Nobel laureate, and he established the academy in 1934. We do lots of things in the academy, and one of the things that we do is promote education and scientific temper. As a matter of fact, Resonance was established in 1996 after a series of discussions were held on how to improve science education in the country. And it was felt that it would be a good idea to bring out a journal of science education for augmentation and enrichment of education, of science education in the country. It also endeavors to build scientific temper. And as a matter of fact, the Indian Academy of Sciences has a trust called the Academy Trust that goes around the country delivering lectures primarily to school students because we believe that scientific temper needs to be developed from the beginning, from an early age. And so the Academy Trust does this through its various kinds of outreach programs. Like I said, that Resonance was established in 1996 after an intensive discussion. It is called the Journal of Science Education, and you will see it printed on the cover of Resonance. I'm pretty sure that most of you have actually seen Resonance and have read Resonance, at least some of the articles. Like Professor Suri, the current editor, has said that Resonance primarily caters to students in the colleges, early students who have joined college, but a substantial number of articles are, as a matter of fact, caters towards high school students as well. In celebration of these 25 years of publication of Resonance, we are celebrating these 2-part lecture series, so to say, one today and tomorrow for undergraduates, for school students, and then immediately following that for 2 days of lectures for undergraduate, for college students. Also, I would like to mention that this year something iconic will be done by Resonance, and that is in celebration of 75 years of our independence, which we are starting to celebrate that, and it will culminate in 2022. And during this period, Professor Suri, our previous editor, Professor Satyamurthy, who is your first speaker today, they are providing leadership in identifying 75 articles that were published in the last 25 years in various issues of Resonance, and putting together these 75 articles under a pair of covers, and that will become the commemorative volume to commemorate the 75 years of our national independence. This is what it is. It will be a feast of science and science education and high levels of science during the 2 days, and Professor Satyamurthy is going to essentially start this entire program through his lecture. Before I end, I want to show you 2 slides, and so what I'm going to do is to share my screen for a minute. And I'm going to share 3 slides, like I said. Are you able to see my slides? I suppose you are.
Yes.
In the newspapers, those of you who have found time to look at the newspapers today, this picture or a similar picture you must have seen a similar picture in any newspaper that was published today. And this is Marcel Jacobs, who won the most prestigious Olympic medal, which is the 100-meter sprint. This man has tattoos all over his body. You can see some of the tattoos on his body. The most interesting tattoo that he has is on his chest that you cannot see. And what I want to do is to read out that particular tattoo that he has on his chest. So let me share my next slide with you. This is what that slide is all about. What it says is that I don't allow life to pass by me, and neither should you. Live. What is really good is to fight with determination, embrace life, and live it with passion. lose your battles with class and dare to win, because the world belongs to those who dare, and life is worth too much to be insignificant. So the portion in yellow is what he has written on his chest, of course, not in English, but in Italian. And this particular quotation comes from an essay entitled Life that was written by this person, again, somebody whom all of us know, Charlie Chaplin. So I will stop here, and what in this feast of lectures that you will hear, what they really want you to do is for you to live your life in science and dare to win. All of the speakers have really fought their lives through and have dared to win in the sense that they have made many seminal contributions to science, because of which they are well known in the world of science. And what we would like to do is for all of you to dare to win in whatever you do, especially if you do science, and that's where our heart is. What we would like you to do in your own careers is to pursue science and dare to win. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful feast.
Thank you, Professor Majumdar, for the wonderful speech, inspiring to me itself. I'm sure students would have been inspired as well. Now I'd like to introduce Professor Gauri Shankar, who is the present director of the ICER in Mohali. Professor Gauri Shankar received his MBBS degree from Christian Medical College, Vellore, and a PhD in bacterial genetics from the University of Melbourne. He was also the director of Center for DNA Fingerprinting and Diagnostics earlier, and is at present the director, as I mentioned, of ICER Mohali. He's also been decorated with numerous honors. He was awarded the INSA Medal for Young Scientists when he was Young Scientist, 1986, CSIR Young Scientist Award in 87, Birla Prize, J.C. Bose Fellowship, Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize, and Padma Shri by the Government of India for his contribution to science. It's a great pleasure to welcome Professor Gauri Shankar. I request him to say a few words.
Yes, thank you, Professor Suri. And I follow in the footsteps of Professor Partho Majumdar, but I'm directly addressing the high school students who are registered here for the talks that are to follow today and tomorrow. What I would like to say is that each of us is born with certain talents and certain interests, and it is the responsibility of what I would call the community, the country, to nurture these talents of every individual so that they can achieve their best. In this process, there are many individuals, many young students who believe they have a passion for science. And what has happened in this country is that for many years after independence, the ability of the state or the community to nurture this passion has not been as good as it has been in other countries in the world. These things are now changing, right? And I would like to make a pitch for the Indian Institutes of Science, Education and Research. There are now 7 of them in the country. They were set up about 15 years ago and provide an opportunity for those amongst you who wish to try their hand in or try their attempt to look at their interest in science and develop it further. The opportunity now exists for you. In the people that are assembled here, we have Professor Satyamurthy, who is you're going to be your first speaker after I finish. He's the founder director of the institute that I am now heading, and a couple of my colleagues, Professor Bagla and Dr. Vijayanand, are on the editorial board of Resonance. We also have Professor Vishwanathan, who will be speaking tomorrow, and he's formally with us after he retired. He has joined the Kriya University in Tamil Nadu. The ICERs and ICER Mohali in particular have very strong outreach programs for school students. We are the regional center for the Vigyan Pratibha program. And as I mentioned, we also have a strong association with resonance. Just from my own example, as Professor Suri said, I did a degree in medicine, not because I thought I had a passion for it. My passion was in science, but there were not too many opportunities at that time. And subsequently, I moved into research. But now I think for students such as you, there are opportunities to begin your undergraduate program itself from a science perspective. So with that, I will stop here so that we can all listen to Professor Satyamurthy's first talk. And on behalf of ICER, I look forward to all of you enjoying this 2-day feast. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gauri Shankar. I would like to welcome Professor Jasjeet Bagla from ICER Mohali. This is one of the collaborating institutes, as we know. I request him to say a few words, share some information about ICER Mohali, if he likes.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Suri. It's a delight to be here at the start of this conference. And to talk about ICER Mohali, as Professor Gauri Shankar also mentioned, is one of 7 Indian Institutes of Science Education and Research. We were set up in 2007. Professor Satyamurthy was the founding director. Our flagship program is the 5-year dual degree BS-MS program. And the target audience are students who wish to go into science research, basic sciences, as well as applications. We take in about 250 students each year into this program. Students do 2 years of core where they study all the subjects, as well as, when I say all the subjects, mathematics, physics, biology, chemistry, as well as additional things like earth sciences, a little bit of humanities, and techniques. We have courses on introduction to computers, hands-on electronics, workshop techniques, and so on. After this, they choose a major subject. Right now, we have 4 majors available: physics, mathematics, biology, and chemistry. We'll soon be adding earth and environmental sciences, hopefully from next year. And during majors, bulk of the courses are in that subject, but students have an option of taking 7 electives in any area that they wish. So that allows them to develop their own programs. We have had students who have majored in biology and taken courses in physics and chemistry, or majored in physics and taken courses in other subjects to find their own niche, develop their essentially develop their own interests. The program ends with a 1-year-long master's thesis, and that essentially trains students into research at a fairly deep level. All the students are expected to do research along with their studies, especially during summers, but the last year is almost entirely dedicated to research. So students who complete this 5-year program and do well are essentially ready to take on research in any area of their interest. We also have integrated PhD and PhD programs, and we have a thriving postdoctoral program as well. Being one of the few higher education institutions in the region, we are plugged into various outreach programs and school-related programs through both the Punjab and Haryana governments, as well as a number of NGOs that are active in this region. We have started a minors program. More than 10 options for minors are available, ranging from data sciences, science education, astronomy, to earth sciences, environmental sciences, and various other aspects. So students who want to have 2 specializations can also make use of the option of minors in our program. So I think that's a reasonably broad introduction. In the interest of time, I will stop here and hand it back to Suri.
Jasjeet, many students would like to know whether the admissions are still open for the ICERs this year, because the CBSE results just came out yesterday.
Yes, the admissions are open for this year, for all the ICERs.
And they have to go to the website and fill the application form?
Correct. Right. So there is ICER admissions website, which is a common admissions website for all the 7 ICERs. The applications will close soon. The entrance test is expected to take place sometime in September.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bagla. Finally, I would like to welcome Professor Joy Mitra from the host institute, IISER Thiruvananthapuram. I think they would have hosted the program physically had it been possible. I request Professor Joy Mitra to tell us a little bit, share some thoughts about IISER Trivandrum and also take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Suri, and all the very distinguished people around. I'm Joy here, and from IISER Thiruvananthapuram. IISER Thiruvananthapuram, one of the many IISERs in the country, was founded in 2008 under the founding directorship of Professor Jemis. And we have spent the last 13 years in the practice of science education, and most importantly, integrating research as a component of undergraduate education in the country. Brilliant students have graduated this institute doing fantastic research along with their education in science. IISER Thiruvananthapuram has been running the flagship BSMS program, the 5-year program, which most of you have been introduced to and you know about. But last year, I would like to point out that IISER Thiruvananthapuram also launched a brand new BSMS program known as the I-Square Sciences, the Integrated and Interdisciplinary Sciences, and we nicknamed it I-Square Sciences. Now, I-Square Sciences aims to give a new feel to the standard undergraduate curriculum, where you base your education on a core curriculum, as well as on associated thematic tracks. So we have launched these 5 brand new programs, I-Square Sciences, called the I-Square Biological Sciences, I-Square Chemical Sciences, I-Square Data Sciences, I-Square Mathematical Sciences, and I-Square Physical Sciences. And some of you, including Professor Karandikar, was a part of our initial brainstorming sessions, where we actually thrashed and looked at what those thematic areas in which we should expand and give a new perspective, a new opportunity to the students of tomorrow. And we are very proud of our I-Square Sciences program. And I would like to extend an invitation to all the students and the other guests present here to have a look at our webpage and become aware of the new program. Apart from the I-Square Sciences program, IISER Thiruvananthapuram also has the integrated PhD and the PhD program. And we propose to launch a master's program also in the near future. The campus of IISER Thiruvananthapuram is really unique. It's on the laps of the Western Ghats. It's lush green, and it's a really attractive place to actually visit. So I extend a warm invitation to all of you to visit IISER Thiruvananthapuram perhaps on slightly better times. With that small introduction, and we have already overshot our time, maybe what I'll do is I'll invite the chairman of our first session, Professor Saikia, Professor Dhrubajyoti Saikia, to chair our first session. Professor Saikia is a professor from NCRA TIFR. He's an astrophysicist and with diverse background researching astronomy and astrophysics, including radio astronomy of galaxy formation and others. So welcome, Professor Saikia. I kindly invite you to chair the first session of this inaugural Resonance Lecture Series.
Thank you very much, Professor Joy Mitra, for your kind introduction and the invitation to chair the first session. A very good morning to all of you. And just to add to Professor Joy Mitra, I'm currently superannuated from TIFR and working at the Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics, both institutions located at Pune. And it's wonderful to see so many of young budding scientists taking part in the Resonance Lecture Series, where lectures by many of the most eminent scientists of our country have been put together by Team Resonance, with Professor Suri as the chief editor, and even being coordinated by Professor Joy Mitra, Professor Indulekha, and Professor Jasjit Bagla. As you're aware, that these lectures are for both high school and undergraduate students on different days, and I'm sure the different speakers will bring forth the tremendous fun and excitement of doing science. Before I invite Professor Satyamurthy Let me just take a few minutes, a couple of minutes, a minute or two, to share some thoughts, especially for the young students, high school students who are participating in this important event put together by Team Resonance. Professor Pattamajumdar and Professor Suri have also underlined the importance of spreading scientific temper, which is enshrined in our constitution, one of the very few constitutions where scientific temper is a part of it. But while mentioning that, we must also be aware, because you young students will be the leaders of tomorrow, both in science as well as in society, that today we live in a country where there's millions are just illiterate. And the number of illiterates actually exceed the population of many countries in the world, smaller countries in the world. And those are challenges for us. We have to create societies where more people have opportunities, using not only the tools that technology gives us, but the methodology and approaches of science, or understandings of the philosophy and the history of science. And as you grow up, many of you will be doing research in sciences, and you'll work with men and women of science across the world. You're not going to worry about what they eat, what religion they practice, etc. You'll work transcending the boundaries of gender, religion, caste, color, and we all are humans that will work together to push the frontiers of knowledge, exploring new frontiers. And just to underline the importance of how actually marginalized communities don't take part or don't get opportunities, I will just allude you to listen to a very recent video by Jocelyn Bell Burnell. She discovered pulsars while working as a graduate student at Cambridge. And she goes through her early life in just a 16-minute video and her discovery of pulsars. And a kind of discrimination she faced as a young student, as a young woman trying to do science. And she's not unique. And this is not ancient history. This is very recent history. She's still an active scientist today. And she won the Breakthrough Prize for the discovery of pulsars, money which she has donated to the Institute of Physics, to institute scholarships to increase diversity in physics. So as we move forward, the lessons which science teaches us, we must also endeavor to try and use that to give opportunities for more, to make science more inclusive, so that science is for all, and we don't let political or other forces accentuate or reinforce differences and discriminations that exist in society. As you young students grow up and engage in science, you'll also realize that science does seem like an unending frontier. The more you know, the more there seems to know. In fact, long ago, after the Second World War, the elder statesmen of science in the US, Vannevar Bush, wrote a small document called Science, the Endless Frontier. This is, of course, targeted at that time to get funding from Congress for science, but also highlights how science is an endless frontier. As you know more, you want to explore more, and you realize how much more there is to know as you embark on this journey. But you also realize when you look at the history and the philosophy of science, there's several giants in different fields held somewhat different views. They thought that there was all there is to know at that particular period of time. And the lesson for you is to actually not take the prevailing wisdom, doesn't matter whom it comes from, but embark on this journey of critiquing and asking questions. Because when you critique and ask questions, you also develop a deeper understanding of the fields that you are going to work in. Just to give you one example, and then I will close, is that Albert Michelson, who measured the speed of light at Morley and disproved the theory of ether, I mean, an illustrious giant like that, he said in the late 1890s, in the early 1890s, late 19th century, that the underlying principles of physics have all been firmly established. And it was just these that need to be applied rigorously to new things that come under our notice. And similarly, Lord Kelvin, who made fundamental contributions to thermodynamics, is often attributed to saying that the future truths of physical science are to be looked for in the 6th place of decimals. And how wrong could they have been? Just a few years later, we had Einstein's theory of relativity, Bohr's structure of the atom, Planck's discovery of the quantum, and you name it, development of quantum mechanics, just to name a few. So the lessons of history must not be lost on us as you embark on this journey, because you have to be the leading scientists, men and women of science of tomorrow. And we live in a very exciting times right now. As Jasjit Bagla, who spoke to you a short while ago, and other cosmologists tell us that all that we know just constitutes 4% of the universe. And we're still trying to figure out what the rest is. And these are indeed exciting times as new instruments continue to be built to explore the unknown and test the frontiers of knowledge. And you youngsters in high school now, when you are ready to do research, these instruments would have progressed significantly. So have a great time over the next few days and have a great career ahead in your lives. But remember that we also have a fair degree of social responsibility as scientists, as citizens, as men and women of science. So let me now invite Professor Satyamurthy. And before he starts off, let me start with a very brief introduction to him. Professor Satyamurthy is a renowned chemist of our country. After obtaining his PhD from Oklahoma State University and engaged in both research and teaching at the University of Toronto, he joined as a faculty member at IIT Kanpur in 1978. He's a recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, too numerous to mention here, and he and his collaborators have made several very important contributions in different areas of chemistry. Sati, as we all fondly call him, was the founder director of IISER Mohali from 2007 to 2017. As you just heard, this resonance lecture series have been hosted by two of the IISERs. The IISERs developing into some of our most prestigious institutions in this country and doing so extremely well in a relatively short period of time is in no small measure due to contributions, seminal contributions of institution builders such as Professor Satyamurthy. He was the chief editor of Resonance from 2018 to 20. And for me, it was a real pleasure to work with him during this period as a member of the editorial board. He's passionate about both teaching and research, and it's a real pleasure to welcome him to start off the Resonance lecture series to celebrate the silver jubilee of this excellent journal, Resonance, this Journal of Science Education. Started off with Professor Mukunda and his friends, Professor Mukunda as a founding editor, and his friends, and along with his friends, they started off at the Indian Academy of Sciences 25 years ago. So Professor Satyamurthy, may I welcome you. We can take questions either at the end or in the middle as you like. The numbers are not too large, so as you prefer, we'll go along.
Yeah, they should feel free to ask questions as we go along.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Saikia, for this kind introduction. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so let me get started by sharing the screen. Yeah, so here I have chosen to speak on what science we can learn and do right in our backyard. You just heard Professor Saikia. He and his colleagues, his mentors, looked at the sky and beyond and learned many things. And when I was a director at IISER Mohali, I was just looking around. And my wife had put together a beautiful garden, and it was a curiosity-driven things. And as you will discover, we made substantial progress. And the later part, I will also mention that we managed to make a discovery and publish a paper. And already you have heard about the IISERs, so I don't have to say any more. This was a picture it was given to me by a colleague from IISER Mohali before I left in 2017. It's a beautiful campus. It gets more and more beautiful. And in the background is the Shivalik range, the outer Himalayas. I think technically that's what it means. So from the campus, from the hostels, from the guest house, from the academic block, you can take a look at the Himalayas. And many times the morning sun falls on it, and it's beautiful to look at. And it's a wonderful way to start your day. And of course, you learn science 24/7. Now, when you look around, most of the time we see things, but we don't look at them. We hear, but we don't listen. And so on, as a beautiful poem goes. But what I found during my stay in IISERs was, by taking a little closer look, we get to learn a lot. And to give an example, I would like to show you the slide of J.C. Bose, who was well-known physicist and was knighted very early on, discovered wireless. He should have received, according to some people, 2 or 3 Nobel Prizes. And yet, in spite of being an outstanding, in addition to being an outstanding physicist, he discovered many things about nature, about the plant kingdom. Very recently, I read an article on him as the father of neurophysiology of plants. This little finger that you see is not my finger, it is downloaded from Wikipedia. But as children, we used to go from school to home and home to school every day in the village. And we are fond of this touch me not. For the students who are listening, and if they are from Tamil background, this is called Tota Chiningi. In English, it means touch me not. And many of us just play with it. But Bose did not stop there. He studied how this sensory perception progresses and is recorded by the plant. So it is, in that sense, a neurophysiology of plants to start with. Now, enough has been said today. Well, enough or not enough, I do not know. It's most important to be a scientist. To be a physicist or a chemist or a biologist or a geologist or a zoologist, these are all artificial divisions created by man. When he started doing science without calling it so, there were no divisions, there were no barriers. They looked at nature as a whole. And somewhere along the line, we got into pigeonholes. Oh, I am a physicist, I am a chemist, I am a biologist. And the biologist until recently would be called botanist or a zoologist and so on. And I myself wanted to be a mathematician. And of course, I went to school and college in the 60s, which was romantic years of physics. Man landed on the moon and more fundamental particles were being discovered. So I wanted to be a physicist. But I ended up as a chemist because my teacher told me you must do chemistry. And those days, decision making was so simple. Either you listen to your parents or you listen to your teacher and the matter ended. But then all I want to say today is that it doesn't matter what you start off. You can continue being a scientist of one kind or another. And curiosity is the most important criterion. Everything else is secondary. And when you do science, somebody quoted Darwin. Darwin incidentally did not have a position of the kind that most of us have had during our life. Much of his work was done staying at home. Much of his research was carried out by sending postcards to people and receiving postcards from people from all over the world. But in the process, he ended up doing monumental work and wrote the book Origin of Species. So there he emphasizes observing is very important, gives you the pleasure. Writing is painful, especially when you want to write for the public, for the professional journals. It is a pain. I know some people, one person, well-known Nobel laureate, I asked him to be a co-author to a paper. He said, I don't want to go through the pain of writing a paper at this stage. And he has written so many papers, hundreds of papers. And yet, in his 80s, he says, he doesn't want to go through the pain of writing paper. But it is said more in a lighter vein, because ultimately, if you are a scientist, you want to establish yourself as a scientist, you want to be remembered as a scientist, and the science that you do, it is very important to document what you observe. And I would like to summarize, people define science in various ways. These are essentials of practicing science. Observation is first. You could be doing an experiment, or you simply observe as Darwin did. or as people like Sankar do, they look into the sky. Nature carries out the experiment. The experiments go on for eons. And yet, and from those experiments being carried out by nature, by sheer observation, and recording those observations, we interpret the results. From those observations, people like Sankar tell us that we are 13.7 billion years old as a universe. 4.6 billion years old is our Earth. These are the interpretations of the results. And then, of course, the exercise is not complete until you publish in a professional journal. Your article is reviewed and criticized, often torn into pieces before it is published, because that is where you stand the scrutiny of your fellow colleagues. And then what appears in print is remembered for generations to come. And that's what the practice of science is all about. And before I forget, I want to thank a whole bunch of people who have contributed to what I'm going to present today. I'm not going to mention every one of them by name. Some of them I would mention as I go along. All this, my little endeavor into curiosity-driven science learning, more of science learning than anything else, was just looking at the little mirchi that was there in our garden. My wife had put various plants, and one of them was mirchi. Of course, I used to go and pluck them and use them for chutney and so on, and I didn't pay attention to the flowers. But then one day, out of curiosity, stepping out of my house, I found this little one that looked almost like a cherry tomato. Normally, I might have even picked it up and put it in my mouth, but I did not. I just asked somebody what it is. The gardener immediately came running and said, "Sir, ye to mirchi hai. This is a chili." And I said, "Is it chili?" He said, "Yeah, it is hot." I said, "How hot?" He said, "Very hot." Of course, in Hindi, he said, "Bahut tej hai." Now, for him, tej and bahut tej is the expression of the hotness or pungence of the mirchi. I became curious. I checked with my colleague, and then he immediately came and told me, "Look at the flower. I'm sorry, this flower is not fully visible. Something went wrong with the slide. I tried to rectify, I could not. So pardon me for that." And he pointed out, I'm sure many of the people listening to today's lecture are from grade 12, I understand. You know the petal, the white stuff is the petal. The stigma is the one that sticks right in the middle here. I don't know why it is called a stigma. For many of us, stigma means different things. And then there is a style. And then there is ovary right in the bottom here. And these little snake hood kind of a stuff are the anthers. They are all important, vital parts of a chili flower. Now, what you see are 3 petals. You don't see 2 of them here. I will show some more as we go along. But he told me this is very characteristic of chili or a pepper. Doesn't matter how hot or how not hot it is. This is the hottest chili on earth, I'm told. This is Naga Bhut Jolokia. As the name indicates, it comes from Nagaland. Why it is called Bhut, I have no idea. But I know our own army people got interested in it, in addition to eating it along with momo and things like that. I've eaten the sauce of Naga Bhut Jolokia along with momo when I went to a place like Sikkim. But the army was interested because it is such a hot chili. There are so many things that one can say about it. We don't have time. But the essence of it is that if you can use it in a gun, in a non-smoking gun, and spray the chili powder, people whoever receives it will run for their life. Now, my colleague, Professor Rao, said, I was not happy with the gardener saying it is hot and very hot. And then my colleague, Professor Rao, T.R. Rao, said, there is a unit called the Scoville unit. You measure the pungency or the hardness by quantitatively stating it in terms of million in Scoville units. The frame of reference is if a 100% pure capsaicin, which gives you that spice, that would be 16 million Scoville units, which means you cannot have anything hotter than 16 million Scoville unit as long as it is capsaicin based. Now, Tejpur Mirchi, we went for a meeting in Tejpur. A mathematics friend of ours was carrying chili in his bag when we were leaving Tejpur. I asked him, why are you buying chili here? Oh, he said that Tejpur Mirchi is very hot. At that time, I didn't know about Naga Bhut Jalokia. And that Tejpur Mirchi is 163 times, give or take, 160 is just a number. That gives you an order of magnitude hotter than the jalapeno pepper. The garden pepper that you normally see, you can see in the bottom I have listed here is a 0.001 million Scoville unit. So when compared to that, Tejpur Mirchi is about 1, which means 1,000 times, and it is even greater in the case of Bhut Jalokia. And interestingly enough, the capsaicin has a chemical structure. So I'm a chemist. Anything that I do, I like to look at the molecular formula and the structure and try to infer its properties. Interestingly enough, the capsaicin, that hot one, has a basic structure which is essentially same as that of vanilla. Resonance carried an article some time back on vanilla. It is extracted from beans, and that is the vanilla flavor in ice cream that you see. See what a contrast it is. With the one structure of vanilla, slight modification can take you from that very nice smell of vanilla to the hard capsaicin. And that's what chemical structure is all about. Here is the one, we call it a pepper. It's a bell pepper. I don't know why it's called a bell pepper, but it's a pepper. But it's so mild that it's practically 0 Scoville units. Okay, this one, if a garden mirchi is 0.001, you can have to put several zeros and then put 1 to define the hotness in chili, in this bell pepper. Now, once I learned about this, I became a pain in the neck for my colleagues in the biology department, particularly Dr. Prasad, who helped me take many of these pictures. And he made a mistake of telling me, the eggplant, bangan, also has this flower has a 5-fold symmetry. And you see the petals, they are all fused together. They are called connate. Connate is the biological, botanists use the word. It's a fused petals that you wish. It's beautiful. That bangan color that you see, there is a little, the anthers that you see in the center. And of course, inside you will see the ovary and things like that. And that eventually gives you the pepper that you see in the market or you pluck in your garden. And our we started morning walks, and then after a while he started avoiding my morning walks with him because I would ask him, what is this, what is that, what is that, and it was taking too much time. But in the few days that he walked along with me, he showed me the tomato flower. It showed me means right in our garden, he pointed out, Dr. Satyamurthy, look at the tomato flower. It has 5 petals, they are not fused, they are separate, and you can look at the anthers there. And this is the flower that eventually gives you the tomato. And he said, and then I said, how? Then he pulled a surprise on me, saying that both of them, they belong to the same family. It was very difficult for me to accept this. I said, how do you know? He said, you saw the flowers. They all have 5-fold symmetry. They all have the same floral structure. And then you look at the fruits, it has a crown and a stalk. And you look at the tomato, it has a crown and a stalk. And of course, if you look at mirchi, it has a crown and a stalk. Now you go around looking at the flowers in the garden, flowers which have five-fold symmetry, and fruits in the garden which have a crown and a stalk. The chances are, it's a good chance that they belong to the same family that tomato and bangan and mirchi belong to. This is a flower I knew from my school days, because before we go to the class, science class, our teacher would ask us to pluck one. In Tamil it was called Umattambu. The story is that if you eat that fruit, you will become you cannot, you will stop speaking. And of course, if you eat a lot of it, you can commit suicide. People in the village would say, don't touch it. And they will tell us, if you eat it, then you can die. But the flower is the one that we used to pluck and go to the botany class. And the teacher would dissect this flower and demonstrate to us. At that time, he didn't tell us about the 5 petals being fused or carnate. He was more interested in telling us the stamen, the ovary, the anthers. And we learned parts of the flower of Datura alba. This is what I learned later on. Alba is white, so that is a Datura plant, which belongs to the same family as the bangan. And as I said during my morning walk, now we went beyond the garden. We walked through the Isar Mohali campus. Then Dr. Prasad showed me the Chinese lantern. We used to plug this and stick it on our forehead, and it'll make a pop sound. And I didn't know it was called the Chinese lantern, and I definitely did not know it belonged to the same family. This is something that we had seen in our village. In Tamil, we used to call it Chondekai. Solanum torvum is the botanical name. Turkey berry is the English name. And you can see the stalk and the crown, and you can see the flower with a 5-fold symmetry. So soon I got excited and said, aha, so all these 5-fold symmetry flowers must be belonging to the same family. He said, look, don't get too much carried away. First, let us look at this set of plants: chili, bangan, tomato, potato, and of course, I have not listed here the tobacco. They all belong to this family called the Solanaceae family. And that was an important lesson for me, which I have not learned all these years, and I became excited. And here I made a little picture of the different plants that we were talking about, and that is the bangan I just took from our fridge for the wife's collection for cooking. And that's a potato. That's a real surprise to me. Potato has no resemblance. It has no crown and no stalk, and it grows underground. If you go to ISER Pune website, you can find out who is doing research on potato and trying to grow it above the ground. I'm yet to see the flower of potato. I'm yet to see if it has 5 petals. And that is the tomato, which belongs to the same family. And I think I have one more here, and that is the bell pepper. Actually, I told my wife I need the garden pepper, but before we get it, I showed the bell pepper saying it will serve the purpose. Now, these so diverse looking plant, the fruits, they all belong to the same family. I got more and more excited. Although I am a chemist and I have certain area domain expertise, instead of talking about them, I went around talking about my little, I won't call it discovery, learning process. Learning about the plants, the flowers, and the fruits. And then my friend Jiten Khurana in Delhi University said, haven't you seen our paper we published in Nature recently? He was part of a global consortium which was doing the genomic analysis. This is for the tomato that appeared on cover page of Nature. The Delhi University team was part of the international team that worked out the genome sequence of tomato. And then he shared a copy of his paper, which was published in Nature. And here they look at the genome topography. And here you can see tomato, potato, eggplant, pepper. These four I showed you a moment ago. And nicotine I mentioned, I could not get my hands on a nicotine plant. In principle, I could have downloaded from Wikipedia, I did not. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But you see, the sequence of the genome sequence is plotted in color code here as concentric rings. Same color means the same gene sequence. You know, it's a brown, red, green, yellow, and so on and so forth. And here is the relationship between the chromosomes of potato and chromosomes of tomato. You see 12 of them listed in one axis, 12 of them listed in another axis. And wherever there is a switch over, that is indicated by these little diagrams here. You know, unfortunately, neither do I have expertise, nor do we have the time to talk about it. What I want to impress upon you is that the two diverse looking fruits, tomato, nobody calls potato a fruit. At least I didn't learn potato to be a fruit. Of course, tomato also. Tomato we learn, of course, love as a fruit. And genomically, they are so much related. There are only small differences that make all the difference between tomato and potato. So by that time, I thought I had learned enough about flowers and fruits. I was ready to say that that means the flowers having five-fold symmetry belong to the Solanaceae family. Dr. Prasad, who studied botany in college and became an evolutionary biologist, distinguished evolutionary biologist of the country, told me, no. You look at cucumber, it has flower, has five-fold symmetry. You look at pumpkin, it has a five-fold symmetry, and they belong to the same family. They belong to what is called the Cucurbitaceae. It's a chemical cucurbital that you can extract from these plants, and that's what it gives a name. And this is the temple flower, Plumeria alba, which has a five-fold symmetry. This is another flower that you see in at the roadside all the time in front of the temples and so on. And there is a Rangoon creeper, the whole bunch of it in IIT Kanpur campus. I'm sure this is there in other places also. And this is a nerium that you see across the country from north to south. As you drive, the highways department have planted many of them. In the village that I grew up, this used to be there in the temples. We used to take bath and pluck some of these flowers and offer it to Ganesha. This is a flower that my father would tell me, don't touch it. It cannot be grown at home. It can be only in the cremation ground. At that time, I did not know what it was called. I was not interested in the name. But later on, I learned it is called Vinca rosea. And it also has an interesting name, Madagascar Periwinkle. This Madagascar tells you that it came from Madagascar. How did it come from Madagascar to India? We will spend a minute or two later to see the connection. But my friend, Dr. Ramarao in Hyderabad, was able to isolate vinblastine and vincristine from these flowers, these plants, and they are very potent anti-cancer compounds. Elsewhere, he has described, people have interviewed him, how he went about extracting vinblastine and vincristine and how it is used by the pharma industry in curing cancer. This is highly toxic. That is why he was telling me last time when I talked to him, there is a book, Life, Science and Matter. I think it's Science, Life, Space, Science, Matter is what the title of the book is, where there is a description of Dr. Ramarao's contribution. And when I was talking to him about it, he mentioned the reason they are not grown traditionally at home is that the chemicals therein are toxic, although they have anti-cancer. They are anti-cancer compounds. That's an Egyptian star. You can see it's a five-fold symmetry, pentas, and a pink pentas. There are five-fold symmetry. And now, once I gave a talk years ago somewhere, then a student sent me an email. Sir, now when I go to the kitchen garden and walk around, I cannot resist looking at the flowers, counting the petals, and trying to identify the family to which they belong. If you send me such a mail, then today's lecture was worth it. Then I know that some of you have listened to my lecture, have paid attention to the details, and have learned a thing or two. All this is there in your books. I'm sure it is there in your botany book. I'm sure you must have learned about it in the class. But learning it as in the book, learning it in the class is one thing. But learning them from nature, by looking at them, by plucking the flower, yeah, and looking at it carefully, gives you a pleasure. And that stays in your mind essentially forever. Nobody can erase that little memory recorded in the brain, in the disk called the brain. That cannot be erased easily until you get old like me, or even older than that. And Dr. Rao told me, look, you have eaten, he comes from Andhra, they like gongura chutney. He said, you know, gongura and bindi, the lady's finger, okra, whatever you call it, they both belong to same family. He said, you can tell it by looking at the flower, the floral structure. You can look at the structure of the leaves and so on. And I learned. So my learning continued. And then, as I said, I would stop at looking at every flower, looking at the symmetry. And then my wife would help me locate, the students would help me. At one stage, even the cook in the guest house started telling me which flower has how many fold symmetry. That is how infectious that enthusiasm became. And when I visited Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science, Jadavpur, Calcutta, where Raman did his pioneering work, I discovered the Raman effect, not in that building, but in an earlier building. Their garden has so many petunias. Then my friend told me, you know, you just see, they are all one flower, petunias, but in diverse color, diverse pattern and color combinations. And for some reason, Japanese have taken to lot liking of this petunia, and they have done a lot of research on them. But this, you know, you look it up. You just type in petunias, and today your generation, when I say your generation, I mean the student generation, is so lucky to have the Googles and Wikipedia. You can search and find out, except that you should know what you are searching for. And as long as you are searching for the needle, you can find it in the haystack. And I learned that Rati Rani, I found out it has 5 petals, and so is the morning glory. Professor Rao would go for his morning walk and would stand there and look at it. I asked him, what is this? He said, oh, don't you know this? This is called the morning glory. And it's definitely beautiful. It's a blue color and pink color, and so on it goes. I went somewhere, going in Kerala, walking around the tea gardens. I was surprised to find the tea flower has 5 petals. I'm sure most of you have drunk tea. I do not know how many of you have looked at the flower of a tea plant. So when I asked the driver to stop, saying I want to take a picture, I asked him, what is this? A tea leaves, tea garden. I said, he said, that's a flower. And then he was not interested in stopping the car, but I was interested, so I wanted to take a picture. And you see remarkable similarity with Goa, Koyaka, is you call it in Tamil. And then as I said, I walk around everywhere. I found 5 petal flowers, and there is rose. Even rose has 5 petals, and that is the crepe jasmine. And the right side, we call it Vattanandyavattai in Tamil. And there are all these interesting things. So I called up my friend, Professor Ashok Sani. He's a well-known geologist. He has done phenomenal work. And he told me for the first time, dinosaurs that roamed on India. I was surprised. I didn't know that. He said, when you go to Narmada Valley, you can find the fossils of dinosaur eggs. And he had shown me a shelf in his lab in Punjab University, Chandigarh. So if you want to know anything about fossils, you could definitely write to him, look up Ashok Sani. Now he lives in Lucknow. His father, his father was a geologist. He was a geologist. His uncle, Birbal Sahni, was a paleobotanist. There is a Birbal Sahni Institute in Lucknow. Now the family, the son, father, nephew, they all were interested in fossils. So I asked Professor Sahni, I am told that these five-fold symmetry flowers belong to Solanaceae family. Have you seen any of them in your fossils? He said, yeah. Actually, there is one flower named after me. Me means Ashok Sahni. His student named it after him. And this fossil was located in Kasoli. Kasoli is not far from Chandigarh. It is in the Shivalik hill range that I mentioned. So it was labeled, the flower was labeled Kasoli Pushpam, Pushpam, Sahni. And then there is Kasoli something radiatus. And here you see is the Kasoli Pushpam Sahni, microscope, electron microscope image of that flower, a fossil flower. It was taken actually by Mrs. Sahni's wife. And then I asked Professor Sahni, how old is this fossil? He said 18 million years old. I was surprised. I said, you mean you found a fossil of a flower which is 18 million years old? And you tell me it belongs to Solanaceae family? He said, yeah, it does. And I said, how did it come? He said, haven't you heard about Noah's Ark? I've heard about Noah's Ark, the biblical story where Noah was collecting all species of specimens of various animal kingdom into his Noah's Ark when there was a huge deluge. In a similar vein, the geologists, they call it Noah's Ark hypothesis. For all these plant and animal kingdom, wherein in one mass called Gondwana, Gondwana is a Vana of Gond. Vana is a Sanskrit word, Gond is a Sanskrit word. You look it up as to how the word Gondwana comes. Even today in Andhra Pradesh, there are tribals called Gonds, and their arts are famous. They're well known, and those art has interesting structure. I leave it for you to find out. If your curiosity has been aroused, then you must look up Gondwana, look at the Gond tribal, look at the Gond art. It is fascinating. Now here is a little picture of the Gondwana land, how all the mass was one mass, West Gondwana and East Gondwana, and something happened 200 million years ago. Remember, Earth is 4.56 billion years. We are talking about 0.2 million. At that time, the entire mass was one piece, and something happened that triggered, and it broke in two pieces. Dr. Sahni has shared me a cartoon, a little movie. For some reason, my computer is not allowing me to show the graphics, animation of how the splitting took place and how India moved and hit the Eurasia plate and Himalayas were formed. In the absence of animation, I would like to show you some pictures. How it was, I remember about 200 million years ago, the trigger took place. In 120 million years, the little bit of a separation had taken place. There you see India here, there is Antarctica, there is Australia, and there is Madagascar, and there is Africa, that is South America, and that is a tip of the South America or Latin America as they would call, which means India, Australia, Antarctica, Madagascar, Africa, South America, they were all one piece. They were all there as part of the Gondwana land before they separated. And if there are species that were there, they should have moved along into different parts of the earth. This is how it was 90 million years ago. This is a countdown. 120 million years ago, 90 million years ago, 65 million years ago, 50 million years ago. Somewhere in this journey, you also get to, in the animation, it would show you when the volcanic eruption took place, when the Deccan Plateau was moving, as part of the India plate moving, there was this volcanic eruption in Deccan, how the dinosaurs perished. All that is described by
Narayan Satyamurthy, chemist, Aisar Mohali. Lecture.
Is that okay? Hello?
Yeah, please
Yeah.
go on. I think someone had unmuted by mistake.
Yeah, okay, no problem. So this is how it was, and today this is how it looks like. Okay, so the India plate has hit against the Asian plate, and of course we have the Himalayas and so on and so forth. And every time you get an earthquake, you get a little bit of a tremor arising out of that, or something else happening. So that's how where we are today, and it is not surprising that plants that are origin in Madagascar could be found here. When I had an opportunity to go to Australia, I kept looking at the plants, looking for plants which are similar to what we observe in India. When you go to Northeast, you find plants that are here, which are very similar to what you find, some of them similar to what you find in Australia. Of course, I have not been to Antarctica. I'm sure when they discover plants underneath lying in mountains of snow, I'm sure they would find plants that have similar structure or similar origin. Is this five-fold symmetry exclusive? The answer is no. You can have many of them, four-fold symmetry, Chandigarh, Mohali, a lot of these mustard fields are there. Even on ISER Mohali campus in the very first year, we had a lot of these mustard plants. Even now, some of them are there. And it's beautiful. Then I learned from my friend that they belong to Cruciferaceae family. The four petals, they look like a cross, so they're Cruciferaceae. This one, I don't know the name of it, but this one, I found out it's a cabbage. In our garden, we had broccoli, which had a very similar flower. We had this radish, which has a similar flower. I had never waited for radish to blossom, but I requested my wife to let some of the radish to yield flowers and seeds. And sure enough, they had this four-petal Cruciferaceae structure. I requested her to let some of the other plants to become broccoli to yield flowers and fruits. And sure enough, the seeds of broccoli, seeds of radish, seeds of mustard, they all look identical. If I put it on the table, you will not be able to tell the difference, but you sow them in your garden. Some will turn up as mustard, some will show up as broccoli, some will show up as a radish, and you will see the flowers have a similar structure. This is also beautiful nature, how it has done. But what is remarkable is that the botanists have learned so much about these plants, classified them based on the floral structure, based on their flower, the leaf structure, and you find remarkable resemblance, commonality in their genome mapping. It is fantastic. My hats off to the botanists who classified and geologists who understood or could understand how the movement would have taken place, how the plants would have common origin. We are told that the Portuguese brought tomato and potato, but my grandmother used to have bangan in her backyard. I don't know whether the bangan came from Latin America or not. I leave it for you to find out. See, in science, one of the most important thing is never to take anything for granted. Please do find out if the tomato and potato actually came from, even mirchi, actually came from Latin America. When the Portuguese brought them, when the Spanish brought them to Portugal, Portuguese brought them from Latin America, etc. But the fact remains that we have them in India, and the fact remains that diverse looking plants belong to the same family. So my learning continued. I found out this Argemona mexicana, which has 6-fold symmetry. The seeds here are very important. They look like a mustard seeds. The flower doesn't look like that of mustard, but the seeds look like that of the mustard. And with a lot of thorns and so on, you can extract oil out of it. At one time, there was a scam in this country saying this oil was mixed with the mustard oil, etc. And that's a little flower. Until I started looking at the flower, I never paid attention to the flower of onions. I was awestruck when I looked at it, 6-fold symmetry. It looks almost like the stud that my daughter was wearing. I know she had 6 stones in her ear stud, and it was remarkable. And this is the Parijat or Shivli flowers. And there's a little flower that I saw while walking around, well, not exactly walking around, that is the car that I was sitting. And when I saw this flower, I was awestruck. So I requested the driver to pluck it. And then I tried to find out with a colleague of mine what plant it belongs to. I don't think they came to a definite conclusion as to which plant it belongs to. They had some guesses. I don't want to tell you what the guess because it could be wrong. And my colleague, I requested him, he looked at the pores that they're there in the flower. He looked at it in a microscope and could get these beautiful structures for the pollens of this beautiful flower. And of course, it's a little close-up shot. It tells you each pollen is of the size of a 50 micrometer. And it has all these sticky ones. You know, this was taken much before the coronavirus became very popular. You know, you see all these sticks. I will ask my botanist friends or my biochemistry friends whether these spikes are made up of protein or not. I do not know. I do not know enough about botany, about the pollens and their chemical composition, etc. Now, while giving this lecture, I have got one more question to ask my friends, and that is to ask about the spikes of these pollens. I leave it for you to find out if these spikes have anything to do with the kind of spikes that you see in the coronavirus. I could be wrong. My guess could be wrong, but then I learned that I was wrong. So one goes on, one asks questions. We don't have too much of time. Then one of the things that one likes to ask is, flowers are beautiful. They have symmetry. Why? Why should they be so beautiful? Why should they have symmetry? A friend of mine told me, you know, the honeybees, they come. They have 2 eyes. So if we have a bilateral symmetry, like I have, this is my picture. And I just put my picture to show the bilateral symmetry, the left and the right. Then I mentioned this when I was giving a talk like this, I mentioned this, then one of the students immediately got up and said, sir, but how about the night flowers? They also have symmetry. Why should they have? Does it mean it is seen only by nocturnal species? Then another student said, sir, how about the ones which get blown? You know, the seeds are blown by the wind. They don't need any symmetry. They don't have to be beautiful. And I have no answers to those questions. All I know is that I have seen certain beautiful symmetric flowers. I had seen a 5-fold symmetry dominating in many of them. And as I told you, not all of them have 5-fold, some have 4-fold, some have 6-fold, some have 3-fold, and some of them don't have symmetry. And so one can continue in this process of my curiosity-driven learning. One day I found out in our garden, again, another plant planted by my wife. This is a flower I had never seen before. Then she had told me, oh, this is passion flower. And then I asked, see, interestingly, somebody mentioned that millions of people in this country are illiterate. They're illiterate by the modern definition of literacy. But those illiterate people know a lot. They can identify the flora, the fauna, they can tell you so many things that you may not even find in textbooks. You may find it in Google by Googling and looking for the right thing in the right place. But these people, gardeners and guards and so on, they can tell you many things. He said, sir, this is Jumka. Jumka means it hang the girls, wear this. It's apparently that's what is called in Bangla. In Andhra, this is called Krishna Kamalam. And why it is Krishna Kamalam, I leave it for you to find out. When I was giving this talk, Professor Gadgil told me, there is a Mahabharata in it. I said, what do you mean by Mahabharata in it? You see, there is a Panchali in the middle, and there are Pandavas, 5 of them, and there are Kauravas, 100 of them. Well, I learned something new. So in some places, it is actually called a Mahabharata flower. This is what I was told in Raichur. And this is how the backside of the flower looks like. It's often good to see not only the front side of the flower, but also the back side of the flower. And then my colleague, Dr. Rao, told me I must take measurements, not for one flower, but 10, 15 of the flowers. You must do a statistical analysis. And then you must give the average length of the flower, the width of the flower, the height of the flower, etc. These are important scientific recording aspect, which I learned as the process went. And when you look at the sideways, you can see how the petals have bent downwards, how these tendrils are sticking out, and how the stigma is rising. There's a little ovary here, and then there are the anthers. My wife did a recording of this opening of this flower. Unfortunately, my laptop does not allow me to show the recording. I leave it for you to observe closely, stand there and watch with or without your cell phone. If you have a cell phone, you can record opening of the flower. If you don't have, nature has given you a pair of eyes, so look at them and record it in your mind. It's a beautiful choreography of anthers, how the flower opens up, how the anthers turn around and do all these things that people who do Bharatanatyam, it's all done by these flowers. And I could see this honeybee looking for the nectar between these fibrils and trying to suck honey from it. My colleagues helped me. It took a beautiful picture. Dr. Prasad took a beautiful picture, how the anthers are resting in this place, which is almost like a fulcrum, and then they undergo the twisting. Because I asked him, how did they twist? He said, if you take a close look, this is where the anthers turn around. And one can learn, if you know how to do this, then you can actually fabricate an instrument. You can have a rotating antenna made in your home or in your lab. He said that is a cross-section of an anther. He knew as a botanist that there will be a twin sac. I did not know. He said, look, there will be twin sacs. And he got a close-up shot. And these are the pollens. He says this is the sac. It's a twin sac. Each sac has tons of pollens. These are the ones that fly away. They are blown by the wind, and they play an important role in cross-pollination. And they stick to the wings of the honeybees. And then, of course, the honeybee goes around, collects the nectar, and then goes and pollinates. Somebody said, if you get rid of all the honeybees, then all your seeds, flora and seeds will come to an end. They will become extinct. These guys are wonderful in connecting nectars, connecting honey. And we, of course, cheat them. We collect honey from them for our own purposes. I'm not saying don't take honey. It's beautiful. It is good for your body. And these honeybees collect them from the flowers. Now, so far, whatever I have told you, everything was practically known in the literature. And when I tried to publish a paper, it was rejected. And the referee was right. But then I was looking at the flowers, One day I saw one flower. I told you, my wife told me this is the passion flower. While I was waiting for the driver to come, I saw there were 2 flowers next day. Next day I waited. I said, look, I want to count the flowers. There were 4 of them. Next day I found 8 of them. I got curious. Look, 1 flower I understand. 2 flowers I understand. And if it keeps doubling every day, and very quickly you run out of number, you hit a huge number. And that is not sustainable. You cannot just go on increasing the number of flowers every day by a factor of 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, etc. So I started recording. And I found out it went as high as 150 flowers per day. And that was fascinating. But what was even more fascinating, this is the recording part. First is the observation part, and then the recording part. Then everybody in our, the directors, Bangla and outside were involved. The driver would count the flower, the guard would count the flower, and we would record them. The reason was that the gardener would count, he would not count properly. Then the driver would check on him. The guard would check on that number. We maintained a record of the number of flowers per day. What struck me was it came down. And then it went up. Then it came down after 2 months. There was a day there was not a single flower. And then again there was a flowering, and it went on and on. And I could see some periodicity. Every 30 days it was going through a cycle. Then when I showed these results to somebody, they said, don't you know this Amavasya, Paurnami and all, this monthly cycle is known. I was not sure. In science, you must look at facts and you must verify. That year, the flowering stopped in the end of, when the winter came, the flowering stopped. There were cycles, and slowly the cycle stopped. And next year, 2015, I found out April 21st, the first flower came and went up, but much less in number than the previous year. And one of the students who was helping me do all this recording, analyzing the data, was doing something more with the plant. I do not know what happened. The plant suddenly died. This is part of science, part of research. A plant that was giving beautiful results stopped, died. I got a colleague of mine to check it out, and he confirmed the plant is dead, nothing can be done. So I did not know what to do. So my wife came to my help. She got the gardener, not just 1 plant, but 4 plants. I said, no need for 4 plants, 1 is enough. You know how it is. Neither my wife nor the gardener listened, but they planted 4 plants. But turned out to be a good thing, because I'll tell you in a moment as to why. Recording these oscillations in 1 plant was interesting, but my botany friends, the referee of our paper, was insisting that I must correlate. See if there is a relationship between this oscillation, this oscillation, this oscillation, this oscillation. And this was in the year 2016. The number of flowers you can see, you can count them in 1 hand or 2 hands in some of them. Went up to 9. Here it went up to 60. Here it had gone up to 100 plus. So some of them gave a large number, but some of them gave a small number. 2017, I was leaving Mohali, but one student agreed to continue to collect the data and show me the results. And here you can see the number went up to 200, 150, and so on. And then we found out a beautiful correlation. All 4 plants in different parts of the garden were simultaneously going through this oscillation. So we had tried to publish. Then the referee, who was very critical of our paper, said, look, if what you have found is true, then it is a synchronous pulsed flowering, and it is a rare phenomenon. So a curiosity-driven observations led to actually making an important discovery of synchronous pulse flowering in this particular plant. And the reason I mentioned the years is partly storytelling, partly how you have to spend years collecting data. Saikya will tell you how in astronomy, Bagla will tell you how in astronomy, astrophysics, people collect data for large number of years. And Rajiva Karandikar will tell you how the big data can be analyzed. You need everything. You need physics, chemistry, maths, and mathematics, statistics to collect data, analyze, and then so on. And then one can go into the mechanism, the molecular mechanism that is responsible for these oscillations. Since my time is up, I am going to stop here. I will only mention that this oscillation was known for almost 100 years. People in Canada, there was a Hudson Bay company which was collecting the hide, the skin. They, whatever hide you bring, they would buy them. They found out by simply buying them, they found out in 1 year they got lot of fox skin. In another year, they got lot of rabbit skin. There was an alternation of the abundance of the skin year after year. So every other year, which means when the rabbit's population goes up, fox would kill them, eat them, catch them, kill them, eat them, and the fox population will go up, and the rabbit population will go down. And then, so this cycle continues. This is in general called a prey-predator model. It was proposed by Lotka, a chemist. It's called a Lotka-Volterra model. Chemists used this Lotka-Volterra model and its modifications to explain chemical oscillations. So what we did was we used the same model to explain the observations that we had made in the flowering of passion flower. I have a lot more to say about the passion flower, but that will be in some other occasion, some other time. So let me stop here and thank the Academy for giving me this opportunity to some of the learning that we did in the process, how along with the help of undergraduate, I must emphasize, all the students who helped me collect the data, analyze them, and model, they were all undergraduate students. That beautiful pattern that you saw in the passion flower, more than one student helped me analyze that pattern. So we have been able to explain that pattern also, but we do not have time to talk about it. So let me stop here and show you the last slide. I'm sorry, I'm skipping here because the last slide is very important. There is the plant science, physics, chemistry, mathematical modeling, and the project continues. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Satyamurthy, for an amazing talk on what one can learn by simple observations of nature and arrive at pretty profound conclusions. Of course, for the young listeners, I should remind that this was the philosophy of the founder of the Academy of the Indian Academy of Sciences, Sir Chandrasekhar Venkatraman, who never stopped from reminding us that nature is one of the best laboratories from one can learn a tremendous amount. And for the young listeners today, I would also sort of allude you to Raman's talk on why is the sky blue, which is just again observing nature. This is a talk which is available in Google. It was given on the 22nd of December 68 at the foundation stone laying ceremony of the Community Science Center in Ahmedabad. It's an eye-opener and a very inspiring sort of talk, asking simple questions and getting profound answers. So let me just go on to the questions that are in the chat right now, and you can raise your hands as well. The first question is from Venkatesh Jha, who asks, sir, if it hit so hard, this is referring to the Gondwana and the clash of the plates, that the Himalayas arose, how did the plants survive?
That's a beautiful question. I have no answer. I did ask this question, but I have no convincing answer. Because if the dinosaurs could die and the others could become extinct species, all this must have been covered by the lava. I can guess, but I don't want to give guesses, because the only guess is that we know by now they can lie buried for ages. And when the conditions are ripe, then the plants can come up.
So not just like the momentum means the clash, the physical hit that it got. Also, it was in another climate, like it was the part of Africa, those plants and all, and like such a sudden change. So their adaptations would have become maladaptations here. And in that case, how it competed against the already present fauna in here, like in means whatever reason it was.
Yeah, as I said, I do not know. All I could say is that if we could get fossils of flowers buried in there, in spite of whatever happened, that means some of the species could survive. Elsewhere, Ashok Sani gave a talk where some of the specimens are buried in amber. And when the conditions are right, whether those seeds can come out of the amber and then sprout, I do not know. You have asked a very important question. I have no satisfactory answer.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you, sir.
Just to add to that, in fact, in the Kalagandaki Valley in Nepal, there are a lot of marine fossils, right, which would have got there while this clash took place. But it was very difficult to get marine fossils at a height of 3,000 meters or so.
Yeah, near Chandigarh area also you get a lot of fossils. Actually, not far from Mohali, Chandigarh is a fossil park. One can see a lot of this, some of them of marine origin. Actually, when you just drive past the Chandigarh area, you see this mountain of sand with a lot of pebbles and shells buried in them, clearly indicating that the sea must have risen.
If I may add,
please.
A PhD student from Isa Mohali who is working in the lower Shivaliks, she has found fossils of a few ostrich eggs.
Really?
And we were doing a trek and we found this bone of a mammoth, about 2 million years old.
Okay.
It's this, if you can see it.
Wow. Yeah, most of the time we look at something like this, we don't know what it is, we simply kick it or go away, but it takes a careful observer to pick it up and analyze and figure it out.
Sam has a comment in chat about this question.
Sam says the clash took place over geological time. So the rate, Sam, you want to say something? Because this comment, so the rate is just about 1 centimeter a year now. Not a dramatic event except for occasional earthquakes.
Yeah, that's interesting observation, because you divide the distance between the original Gondwana land to where we are today and divide it by 200 million years. Yeah, that gives you the back of the envelope estimate. Yeah, thank you, Sam, for pointing it out.
Yeah, welcome. Yes.
Actually, even measurement of actual movement of plates by VLBI techniques gives a small number of that ballpark.
Yeah, but our friend Josh's question is, if there was volcanic eruption, how did they survive?
Right.
He was not so much worried about the shaking that was taking place. But if dinosaurs could die, of course, that could have happened in Deccan Plateau and some other parts of the Bharat land, Indian subcontinent might have been away from all fire and the things took place.
Not so just only that, also like the climatic adaptations that is needed. Like it has already to compete with the existing that place. So that place, they have advantage over this one because they have to adapt. These guys have to adapt to that, and that would take time, maybe millions of years for higher order plants. Yeah, which is like that is pretty much time to get extinct. Like they get extinct when there is a competition. Like the resources are always scarce in such environments.
Yeah, but you see, Madagascar periwinkle seems to be a classic example of a plant which can survive harsh conditions. In our village, I remember we could see them near the cremation ground, and nobody would let them, and they could flourish in the cremation ground area. I'm just giving an example. I'm not necessarily answering your question satisfactorily.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
We move on to the next question, which is from Shankar Palit, who asks, why does the number of petals in flowers resemble to that of the Fibonacci series?
Number of petals in a flower, I am not sure belongs to Fibonacci series. For example, when people look at the sunflower and look at the buds and the arrangement, that follows the Fibonacci series. Because the number of petals is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They don't per se follow the Fibonacci series.
Okay. There are no more questions in the chat. If there's any question, anybody wants to put their hands up, we can take it for just a couple of minutes more or so, and then we'll take a break before the next talk by President Nandini Chatterjee Singh. Vidya, you want to unmute yourself and say what you want to say?
No, I was just clarifying in response to the student who was asking about plants being more adapted to the area they were in. So it's not always the case that organisms in an area are more adapted than other species that come into that area. That's why we have a lot of invasive species. Possible for species that come into a new place to outcompete species which are there in that area already.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
The Congress grass is a classic example, I guess.
Yeah.
PL480.
Lantana.
Lantana also, yeah.
Thank you, Vidya.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vidya. Okay. Before I close, I just sort of, allude to a very important point which Professor Satyamurthy mentioned about the indigenous knowledge of the tribals. Because although they may not be actually educated in the tradition, in the modern sense, but the amount of indigenous knowledge they have is sometimes just tremendous. And at least for the young sort of listeners today, I would refer to a book called Wood Smoke and Leaf Cups. It's written by an anthropologist called Madhu Ramnath, who spent about 10 years actually living with the Duruas in the Bastar region and documenting his life, their knowledge, and also the insensitivity of the state to deal with the tribal communities. It's a beautiful scholarly book which is called Wood Smoke and Leaf Cups by this anthropologist Madhu Ramnath. Okay, the last question we'll take up, which is from Zenith Malhotra. Sir, how do we measure the pungency in Scoville units? If a pepper is say 1,000 times another in Scoville units, is that 1,000 times spicier?
The answer clearly is yes. But how do you measure? What they do is they grind the spice and they dissolve it in alcohol water mixture because it will not dissolve in water, but you have an alcohol water mixture and go on diluting by several factors or orders of magnitude as long as the spice pungency remains. So it's a combination of a quantitative measure by diluting it and ultimately tasting the pungence. This is what I have understood, okay? People who are professional may have a slightly different, may have a better explanation.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Satyamurthy, for an amazing start to the Residence Lecture Series. We'll take a short break now and we'll start on time at 11:45.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much.